Ignore. The moment those photos resurfaced, everything shattered. Not quietly, not gradually, violently. Like a secret dragged into daylight after years of careful burial. Suddenly, Meghan Markle wasn't just standing beside Prince Harry in public memory anymore. No, another man kept appearing beside her. Again, and again, and again. The same face, the same proximity, the same silent presence that refused to disappear no matter how much time passed or how far Meghan climbed. Marcus Anderson. The name that once floated harmlessly beneath the surface had exploded into full focus, and now people weren't whispering anymore. They were staring, watching, questioning everything.
So the whole time we're thinking that that's her husband, Jack Brooksbank.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out, guess who that mystery man was the whole time?
Was it Meghan's guy?
It was Marcus Anderson.
Marcus Anderson, yeah.
Why is she having dinner with Marcus Anderson, and why is he then going home with Meghan and Harry?
By the time January 2026 arrived, those images didn't look like harmless social moments anymore. They looked like evidence. A pattern, a connection too consistent to dismiss. Every timeline scroll felt like uncovering a breadcrumb trail. Meghan never intended the world to follow this closely. Soho House events, fashion weeks, private dinners, family outings, even Disneyland with her own children. Marcus wasn't lurking behind her. He wasn't blending into the background. He wasn't just some friend. He was right there, always beside her, always close enough to remind anyone paying attention that his presence wasn't optional. It was permanent. And that's when the uncomfortable question exploded into public consciousness. Who exactly was Marcus Anderson to Meghan Markle? Because this wasn't coincidence. Coincidence doesn't repeat itself perfectly for over a decade. Marcus Anderson wasn't some random social climber lucky enough to orbit celebrity circles. No. He was the gatekeeper, the fixer, the silent architect of access. The man who literally controlled entry into Soho House, the private empire where power didn't just exist.
He attended the garden party and overheard something Meghan said to Harry. So after about 15 minutes talking to guests and being charming, Meghan turned to Harry, and I quote from Lady C's book, "Harry, this is really boring."
It was manufactured. Inside those velvet shielded walls, deals were born, relationships were engineered, futures were rewritten, and Marcus held the keys. He decided who got in, who stayed out, who mattered. And Meghan? She wasn't just inside, she was protected, guided, positioned. But here's the detail that sent chills through anyone connecting the dots. Meghan was never photographed alone inside Soho House. Not once. Not a single image existed of her walking those halls independently. Every time she appeared, Marcus was there. Always him, always watching, always ensuring she belonged. That wasn't friendship, that was sponsorship. Hovering quietly above it all was Nick Jones, the billionaire founder of Soho House, the man who built an empire on secrecy. These weren't public spaces. These weren't casual bars. These were controlled environments where discretion was the only currency that mattered. Nick knew everything. Every guest, every introduction, every arrangement made behind closed doors. Nothing happened without purpose. And yet, somehow, Meghan Markle, at the time just a cable television actress earning respectable but unremarkable paychecks, was moving through these spaces effortlessly. Bigger stars had been denied access. Celebrities with global fame had been turned away for being too visible, too disruptive, too attention-drawing. Soho House didn't tolerate chaos, it curated influence. So, how did Meghan get in? The answer was standing beside her in every photo. Marcus Anderson. He didn't just open doors, he rewrote destinies. Before Marcus, Meghan was talented but limited. She had ambition, yes. Hunger, absolutely. But she didn't have proximity. She didn't have access to the rooms where futures were negotiated. Then Marcus appeared and suddenly everything shifted. Invitations appeared from nowhere. Introductions materialized effortlessly. Elite circles welcomed her without hesitation. Doors that never opened for outsiders swung wide, and Marcus was always there, watching, guiding, ensuring. December 2014. A photo surfaces. Meghan's arm wrapped around Marcus, their bodies close, comfortable, intimate in a way that didn't look accidental. Faces leaned in, energy unmistakable. This wasn't a distant acquaintance. This was trust, dependency. June 2016. Toronto Gala. Marcus's arm firmly around Meghan's waist, 1 month before her blind date with Prince Harry. 1 month before her entire life detonated into global royalty. 1 month before Marcus handed her the most important introduction of her existence. Because that's the truth nobody can erase. Harry didn't find Meghan randomly. He didn't stumble across her by fate. He went to Marcus. Specifically, Marcus arranged a meeting, Marcus selected the venue, Marcus controlled the environment, a private Soho House room. Intimate, quiet, controlled. 7 or 8 people maximum. No press, no leaks, no chaos. Marcus engineered the moment, and Meghan stepped directly into destiny. But Marcus didn't disappear afterward. He didn't fade into the background like a matchmaker whose job was done. No, he stayed. He remained present. At the wedding, at the baby shower, at private family events, at public appearances. Always near enough to remind everyone that his role hadn't ended. September 2017. Invictus Games. Meghan sat beside Marcus, smiling toward him, leaning in naturally. Harry sat nearby, but something in his posture looked different. Detached. Watching. A third presence inside his own relationship. Years passed. Marriage. Children. Royal exit. California relocation. Marcus never left. Then came October 2025. Paris Fashion Week. The moment that ignited everything again. Meghan and Marcus walking together through Paris streets. Not linked casually, not distantly. Their hands interlocked, fingers naturally intertwined, not hiding, not apologizing. Just existing like they always had. Social media exploded instantly. Because handholding isn't accidental. Handholding carries meaning, and people started asking questions nobody could silence anymore. June 2025. Disneyland. Meghan celebrating her daughter's birthday. Family photos surface. Joyful, private, controlled. But one detail stood out like a crack in carefully polished glass. Marcus was there, his face partially covered by an emoji, hidden, concealed, protected. And that's when everything started feeling intentional. Because if Marcus was just a harmless friend, why hide him? Why obscure his presence? Why maintain secrecy around someone who had been part of Meghan's life for over a decade? The answer lingered in silence. Heavy, uncomfortable. Marcus wasn't just a friend. He was infrastructure. He had built her access. He had connected her to power. He had engineered introductions that changed her life permanently. He had introduced her to Harry. And once you understood that, everything else became impossible to ignore. Marcus wasn't background. He wasn't secondary. He was central. The man behind the curtain who never stepped fully into the light, but whose fingerprints were everywhere. And the most unsettling part? He was still there, still close, still present, still watching, still involved, even now. And that's where the illusion began to crack, not loudly, not in one dramatic explosion, but in tiny, almost invisible fractures that only the most observant eyes could detect. Because while the world was busy watching Meghan Markle transform into a duchess, into a global symbol, into a woman who had seemingly leaped across social classes overnight, one man never stopped orbiting her gravity. Marcus Anderson, the constant, the shadow, the silent architect whose presence never faded, never weakened, never drifted away, even after the royal wedding sealed Meghan's place in history. Most matchmakers disappear once their job is done. They step back, they dissolve into memory. But Marcus didn't vanish. He embedded himself deeper into her private life, into her family moments, into the very fabric of her existence. And that's when people started noticing something deeply unsettling. Marcus wasn't behaving like someone who had simply introduced two people. He was behaving like someone who had built something far bigger and wasn't about to lose control of it. Because look at the timeline closely. Not emotionally, not romantically, logically. Before Marcus, Meghan was climbing, but slowly, respectably. She had a steady career, modest fame, and a carefully managed public image. She was known, but not untouchable, visible, but not globally dominant. Then Marcus entered her world fully, and everything accelerated at unnatural speed. Private invitations, elite gatherings, exclusive introductions. Suddenly, she wasn't knocking on doors anymore. Doors were opening before she even arrived. Marcus didn't just give her access, he gave her positioning. And then came Harry. Prince Harry, the man born into one of the most powerful families on earth, didn't meet Meghan randomly. He didn't discover her organically. He stepped into a meeting orchestrated entirely within Marcus's controlled ecosystem. A Soho House room. Private, secured, selected guests only. No chaos, no unpredictability, just precision. Marcus controlled the variables. Marcus controlled the environment. Marcus controlled the introduction. And once Harry walked through that door, Meghan's trajectory exploded into global permanence. But here's the part nobody can comfortably explain. Marcus didn't step away afterward. He didn't fade into the distance. He remained, always near enough to remind Harry and everyone watching that he wasn't just a witness to Meghan's rise. He was part of its foundation. Sources began whispering about tension. Not loud confrontations, not explosive arguments, just quiet discomfort. The kind that lingers beneath smiles. Because imagine being Harry. Imagine knowing that the man who introduced you to your wife had unrestricted access to her life before you existed in it. Imagine knowing he still did. Marcus wasn't just present publicly, he was present privately. Baby showers, weddings, family gatherings, vacations, moments that most couples guard fiercely were still shared with him. And Harry couldn't simply object, because objecting meant questioning everything. It meant questioning how they met, questioning the foundation of their love story, questioning whether Marcus was just a facilitator or something far more essential to Meghan's world. And Harry had already sacrificed everything. He walked away from his family, from his brother, from his father, from the institution that defined his entire identity. He burned bridges that had existed since birth, all for Meghan, all for the life they chose together. So what could he say now? What could he challenge without risking the collapse of the very reality he built his future upon? That's the psychological trap, the quiet cage no one talks about. Marcus wasn't just Meghan's past. He was her infrastructure, her network, her access point to power long before Harry ever entered the picture. And even after the royal exit, the dramatic departure that stunned the world, Marcus remained. California became their new stage, new ventures, new empires, new ambitions. And Marcus was still there, quietly facilitating introductions, maintaining connections, ensuring Meghan's influence didn't fade after leaving royal life. Because Meghan didn't lose power when she left royalty, she retained it. She retained the fame, the visibility, the platform, the influence. And Marcus helped maintain the pathways that kept it alive. This wasn't random loyalty, this was sustained alignment. Even Nick Jones, the founder of Soho House, stayed close. He attended the royal wedding. He never publicly explained Meghan's deep integration into his private network. He never clarified Marcus's role. He stayed silent. And in environments built on secrecy, silence isn't absence. Silence is protection, because Soho House thrives on discretion. It survives by ensuring its secrets never become public narratives. Once the illusion of privacy breaks, the entire ecosystem collapses. Trust evaporates, influence weakens, so the silence remained intact. But the photos didn't lie. Paris, October 2025. Meghan and Marcus walking side by side, fingers intertwined naturally, effortlessly, no hesitation, no explanation. Just the quiet confirmation that their connection hadn't weakened. It hadn't faded, it endured. Disneyland, June 2025. Marcus present again, face partially concealed, hidden from full public visibility, yet undeniably there, because Marcus was never truly meant to be seen. He was meant to operate just close enough to influence, but distant enough to remain undefined. And that ambiguity is what fuels everything. Because relationships built in public are easy to understand. They come with labels, definitions, clarity. But relationships built inside private ecosystems, inside exclusive networks where access itself is currency, operate differently. They don't require explanation. They require loyalty. And Marcus has remained loyal. The most chilling realization isn't that Marcus introduced Meghan to Harry. It's that he never stopped being part of her world afterward. He wasn't temporary. He was permanent. Even now, years later, as Meghan builds her post-royal empire, as she reshapes her identity beyond the monarchy, Marcus remains beside her, quietly, consistently, unshaken. Because power doesn't always sit on thrones. Sometimes it stands just outside the spotlight, watching, guiding, ensuring. Marcus Anderson was never just part of Meghan's past. He was part of her transformation, and he's still part of her future. That's why the photos keep resurfacing. That's why the questions refuse to die. That's why the silence feels louder than any explanation ever could. Because deep down, everyone senses the same truth. Marcus didn't just witness Meghan Markle's rise. He helped create it.